Imagine waking up one morning, and the government tells you, no more social media. Your voice, silenced. Your memes, their opinions, your digital community, gone. Now, add to that years of frustration, corruption, unemployment, leaders who don't listen. What would you do? That's exactly what happened in Nepal, and the streets exploded with protests, led mostly by young people, Gen Z. But what made them take this massive risk, even when lives were on the line? To answer that, we need to dive into psychology. In early September 2025, the Nepali government suddenly banned social media platforms, saying it was to stop misinformation. But for young people, social media wasn't just entertainment. It was their voice, their community, their only space to be heard. The ban was the last straw in a pile of frustrations. Corruption scandals that left people hopeless, unemployment that crushed young graduates' dreams, and a political system that seemed to silence their future. So, they took to the streets. Thousands marched, chanted, clashed with police. Tragically, at least 19 people lost their lives, and many were injured. The ban has since been lifted. The movement goes way beyond Facebook or TikTok. It's about freedom, dignity, and the psychology of resistance. Psychologist Ted Gurr's relative deprivation theory explains why protests begin. It says people revolt when they feel deprived compared to what they expect. For Nepali youth, the expectation was clear. Education should lead to jobs. Democracy should give freedom. Social media should allow expression. But reality? Joblessness, censorship, corruption. The gap between what they deserved and what they got created anger. And that anger spilled into the streets. But anger alone doesn't create a movement. To turn frustration into action, people need unity. That's where social identity theory comes in. Henri Tajfel and John Turner showed that we define ourselves through group membership, us versus them. For Gen Z in Nepal, it became us, the youth, fighting for our future, versus them, the corrupt leaders silencing us. This group identity gave them strength. Alone, one person may feel powerless. But in a crowd, chanting with thousands who share the same pain, people feel unstoppable. That shared identity, we are Gen Z, we are fire, is what made the protests explode. Finally, why did things turn violent? That's explained by the frustration-aggression hypothesis. When people's goals are blocked, when peaceful protests are met with police batons, tear gas, or silence, frustration builds. And frustration often turns into aggression. That's why some demonstrations escalated into clashes. Not because protesters wanted violence from the start, but because repeated blocks left them with no other outlet. It's psychology's tragic cycle. Silenced voices often become louder, angrier, and more desperate. So, what can we learn from Nepal's protests? First, that protests aren't just about politics, they're about psychology. They arise when expectations are crushed, when identities unite, and when frustration boils over. Second, that youth psychology is different. This is the first generation in Nepal raised as digital natives. To them, banning social media isn't just shutting down apps, it's erasing their identity, their community, their voice. And finally, that even in the face of violence, the psychology of hope drives people forward. Movements like this show us that when enough people share a sense of injustice, even a small country can create a wave big enough to be heard worldwide. The protests in Nepal are not just a political story. They're a human story about identity, hope, and the psychology of resistance. So here's the question I want to leave you with. If your voice was taken away, your freedom of expression silenced, would you stay quiet or would you fight to be heard? Because in the end, the psychology of protest isn't about them. It's about all of us.